We just had that conversation about wastewater treatment plant upgrades. Oh, it's Johnny and I.
It is now 4:45 PM on June 12th, and the time for the work session on the capital projects. So I'll turn it over to the city manager and
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to turn it over to our Public Works Director, who has been working on this year as all past years as well. Thank you, Kyle.
All right, thank you. I will do some brief remarks. Can you hear me okay, Mayor? I feel like I'm really getting out there. I'll just have a few brief remarks and kind of very quickly go over the capital project planning and implementation at the city, just as a real quick overview, and then perhaps get into the details of the two documents I just handed out. Just as a reminder, the general fund and the utility fund are totally separate, and the capital planning and expenditures are wholly separate. We do them concurrently, obviously, for consistency and to balance our available workforce, manpower, funding, et cetera. So capital project planning and implementation, two separate things. Tonight, we're talking about the 5-year CIP, which is a long-range planning document. It helps us with responsible capital asset investment and management. The city has capital assets in a broad spectrum of areas. We've got structures and buildings. We've got boardwalks. We've got parks. We've got streets and transportation. We've got quality of life aspects that we invest in. We've got assets that are at earlier in their lifespan. We've got some that are aging and in need of repair and maintenance, things of that nature. So the planning process helps us balance our needs and available resources. It helps us plan for adequately funding anticipated needs. It also allows us to prioritize some of those needs, things that are of more immediate need of funding and repairs and maintenance, for example, or potholes and failing roofs, things like that. And then some other long-range planning projects and endeavors, things like bringing water and sewer down to some of our parks that are a priority for our community and our council, but may rely on outside funding and grant opportunities, things like that. Capital project delivery, where we actually encumber funds and dedicate resources to accomplishing those projects. We do that through the capital budget. That's something we also annually take a look at. In the last few years, we have established a procedure where the 5-year CIP establishes the next 5 years of planned projects. Like I said, in the beginning stages, more refined, more defined, and then as you get later and further out in the years, perhaps less refined and perhaps more reliant on outside funding. But the first year of the 5-year CIP is intended to be our capital budget. So in this case, FY25, which we'll enter into on July 1st, after this work session and guidance from the council, we'll bring back a resolution adopting the 5-year CIP and also an ordinance that would appropriate funding for the specific projects identified in FY25. So that's where the planning document and the delivery of these projects kind of mesh in that first year in the upcoming fiscal year. There's one other I should mention, capital project related legislation that comes before council, and that's the legislative priorities. We do a unique standalone legislation, typically closer to session in the fall, where we use these planning documents to identify certain legislative priorities, and we can kind of custom tailor those to our particular community's needs, and we transmit that to our state and national delegation for funding opportunities. And I can get into them later as we touch on some of those projects, but we've been successful on several projects in getting them identified and in some of the national and state capital planning documents. Also, I'm happy to be interrupted anytime, answer any questions, be as informal as the mayor wishes, and proceed accordingly. So, with your permission, Mayor, maybe what I'll do is just kind of start down the list and ramble on, and folks can let me know if they've got questions, concerns, or comments.
Yeah, anybody can jump in when they got a question.
Okay, we'll start with the utility fund. It's fairly quick and easy. Very minimal changes, really minimal changes across the board. The city's fortunate to have a lot of projects that are currently active. We've got several grant opportunities coming down the pipeline. We've also are proposing a appropriately modest capital budget in this first fiscal year, FY25. You'll note that now I'm kind of jumping back to the general fund because I'm excited to talk about that, but you'll note that it's currently proposed at about $575,000, which over the last decade is a fairly conservative and modest appropriation for capital expenditures. And we're able to do that because we have kept up to date and funded our priorities throughout the past years. So not too many changes to these. Both these documents, again, on the first page is the proposed CIP that after this work session and feedback from council, we'll bring back in the form of a resolution for formal adoption. On the back page is simply last year's adopted CIP. So I wanted to include that so that council members can just see the difference between the 2 years. So in FY25 for the utility fund CIP, and again, to reiterate, general fund FY25 first year ends up being our capital budget. Utility fund is exclusively mid-year appropriations. So we don't bring forth a annual capital budget for the utility fund. When those projects are ready to move forward, we bring an ordinance specifically for those projects before the council for consideration and appropriation.
Mayor Whitney.
What?
So on the biosolids dewatering system at the 4.1, I thought that was something that we were currently working on.
That's correct. We are currently working on that. And you'll note, if you look back at last year on July 5th of 2023, we had targeted a $3 million project. And if you flip back to what we're looking at right now, it's a $4.1 million project. And we have advanced that project with design, with permitting, et cetera. And we've got a pretty firm grasp on what it's going to cost. We have been fortunate to receive both grant funding and state revolving fund loan funding for that project. And even better news, within the last couple weeks, we received notification from the state that $1 million of the state revolving fund loan funds will be forgivable in the form of a subsidy. So essentially a grant.
So how much out of the 4.1 is coming from the city utility fund?
That's in the big green binder. Unless you have that handy. I will follow up with that. We did not remove, I'm not proposing to remove that from the 5-year CIP because some of it is still pending. So we just received notification of the second loan for which $1 million of it is planned to be forgivable. But the overall project cost as it stands is $4.1 million. I will follow up with the council on the breakdown of utility fund dollars, grant dollars, and loan funds. It's really a conglomerate of funding. We received 3 congressionally designated spending grants for 3 utility projects, cost escalation, project increases. Our number 1 priority, the biosolids dewatering project, grew exponentially. We requested a modification and the ability to use all 3 of the separate congressionally designated spending grants on that project, received permission for that. So we actually have 3 grants, 2 loans, and utility fund money. And I will make sure to put that into a spreadsheet in a clearer fashion and get it out to council.
That would be good to know, because as we work on other projects over the year, you know, I mean, I know I don't think we have 4.3 in the utility fund at this time. So, you know, if all of this was coming from the city, then that's why it'd be nice to know kind of the numbers associated with the grants and other funds that are coming. So what's our commitment from the city?
I believe that 1.96 million is the grants, the congressionally designated spending grants that he's talking about. I believe that's the number.
Yeah.
And then the rest, I believe, is coming from a loan. And $1 million of the loan is being forgiven. I don't believe anything's coming out of our utility fund at this time. I think it's all coming from loans and grants. Except for what has already been spent on design,
Yeah, which is about 500,000 or 600,000.
but that's already.
If I may, Mr.
Off the top
Mayor?
of my head, so that might not be exact, but I believe that's pretty close.
Okay.
Me to repeat all that?
I will repeat. Okay.
So kind of expanding on Vice Mayor Parker's line of questioning, at a recent meeting in the last few months, I believe it was when we were discussing the Whistle Hill sewer extensions. I believe we were provided with a brief report that outlined utility fund balance along with all projected projects that would potentially be affecting the money in that fund. Would it be possible for us to get an updated version of that report? I was trying to find that in my email, and I'm still need to do a little bit more digging on that, but that was an incredibly helpful report. And that was, I believe, compiled before this draft CIP that's before us. So it'd be nice to get an updated one that factors in the new direction that we're going with these projects.
Yes, I can do that. I will note that much like the general fund CIP, we often identify projects on the utility CIP that, especially as you get further out in the years, that are projects that may require outside funding and grant sources and loans. And one of the reasons we do include that on the CIP that may not have been included in the calculation for the rate study or planned capital expenditures. So what I'm saying is the calculation for intended expenditures in the utility fund may not match exactly the CIP. For example, the loan questionnaire, you receive points if a project's been identified as a community priority, et cetera. So identifying the aerobic digester in 2027 as a, well, in this case, TBD, because it's a big dollar, but well seat treatment upgrade, for example, 900,000. That might not be something that we embark on until such time that we get outside funding to assist us with that. And simply being on this community recognized, board adopted priority list will enhance the opportunities and abilities to get funding. So, but we will get you that updated list. I don't know that anything has changed since we provided that to you.
Cool. To Vice Mayor Parker's point, I think where she was going with this, it was just be really helpful for us to know what balance we have in the utility fund as weighed against projects that we really intend to realistically move on, I would say, in the next year or two, not necessarily the projects that we'd like to go to someday,
Sure.
but realistically, what are we spending against what we have?
I have that in my hand right here, but it's much more complex with a lot of other data, including salaries and benefits and maintenance and operations. So we can consolidate that, refine it, make sure that we use the same format we used last time and get it out to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Looking at on the biosolids for 24, 3 million cost, whereas for fiscal year 25, 4.1 million. Is that basically the same project, just new costs, or is there additional aspects to the project that pushed from 3 million to 4.1 million?
Largely the same project that costs more. The design has been advanced to a 95%, nearly 100% level, whereas a year ago it was not at that stage. So it was probably at 65%. So largely the same project.
Let me just ask follow up, because we're seeing that it seems to me on many things. Should we anticipate, as the future moves on, that whatever costs were initially provided, that the actual cost once it gets ready to be built is going to be significantly higher?
Yes, in general, construction cost escalation tracks with inflation and other influences and factors. It would be the administration's job to reflect that when we revisit these annually and apply. Last year, I applied a wholly inadequate cost adder for inflation and construction costs that it didn't probably match with what ended up happening in the construction industry. But so that'd be a task that we should be on top of and monitoring. In this case, in the case of the biosolids dewatering, it's probably both. Construction costs have gone up and we've increased the scope from what we had intended on spending. So
There has been some increase in scope.
largely the same project. The intent and objective of the project is to replace our dewatering system. The choices that could have influenced the cost would be choosing good, better, and best from an equipment standpoint. Equipment doesn't quite fit in the existing footprint of the building. Now we're going to demo one side of the building and bring it out. So yes, we've increased costs with scope, but only to meet the objective of the original intent. So same project, biosolids dewatering, but it perhaps costs a little bit more than we had anticipated.
One of my concerns on that would be for people making bids. If people making bids know that the cost number estimates are really not what it's going to really be, it certainly provides a lot more room for wiggle in terms of what they present. And particularly if they know whatever they say, they can always ask for more because everything goes up more. And so again, it just seems like there could be a lot of change documents adding cost to things. It just seems more complicated.
Yep, and that's why we strive to make sure that we have adequate funding at the time of letting the bid. So when we put it out on the street, the city prides itself in not that it doesn't happen, but what we really don't want to do is put a bid out there and not have the funds to award it because it costs real time and money to bid a project. And so it's our job to make sure that we've adequately funded a project when we put it on the street for bidding. And so we do have to revisit the funds, much like we did with the field house. You know, we kind of went back and said, okay, now that we've reduced the scope and updated our cost estimates, can we responsibly bid this project and have a reasonable expectation to award it to a contractor for a real amount that they expect to make their overhead and profit and have a successful relationship, because that's what we want. So always a challenge, and particularly now. And I'm eagerly awaiting the CES Fire Station 1 bid opening to overanalyze and speculate on what's going on in the construction industry.
Thank you very much.
Do we have a date certain on when this project is actually physically going to start?
The biosolids dewatering?
Yes.
Yes. We strategized with our design consultant in regards to the challenges that there's going to have to be temporary dewatering activities that take place while we're making these modifications, because it's a 24/7 plant and influent doesn't stop coming, to put it nicely. So winter conditions influenced our strategy for putting it out. End of July, early August is a current target to bid the project.
And is this a project that can be worked on during the winter months?
Our approach is going to is potentially to let the industry decide, to give the experts, the folks that are going to construct this, the opportunity to do it as cheaply and efficiently as they can. So our strategy in letting the contract out would be to bid it such that we can issue a notice to proceed and allow the contractor to make those choices based on their experience, qualifications, capabilities, equipment, much like we did with the field house. Allow them to make that choice. So it's possible. Perhaps there's package units that somebody could procure from the lower 48 and ship up here cost effectively and get it done partially in winter, but we'll allow a period of performance that lets them start like in earnest in March. So yes, they could do it in winter, but we're not going to require it. We're going to allow it. That makes sense. We're looking for best value.
So in effect, by the end of August, we should start work on it.
Potentially, yeah. Or make an award at the very least. And then we would firm up the construction schedule and approvals for that. Then we would know exactly what's going to happen. We have to approve the dewatering plan. It needs to, have appropriate risk management, et cetera. We need to be able to operate the plant, et cetera. So we plan to bid it late summer, early fall, and then establish the construction schedule. Again, we're looking for best value. If we're, certain construction industries may value time more than money, right? I would rather pay for an accelerated process. In our case, in this particular project, we're willing to allow a longer period of performance and let the marketplace come to us with the most efficient, cost-effective design.
Moving right along.
Moving right along. Yeah, it is the most exciting project and the most expensive. So I'm happy to dig into it. I probably won't get into significant detail on the others. They are existing projects. We have talked about them in the past. Happy to talk about any particular if there's interest. The changes, besides that dollar amount, we did move pH control at the wastewater treatment plant down to FY26. You'll note on the side, along with the permit renewal, 2 of these things are dependent or pending on DEC. This is our discharge permit renewal process. We've been collaborating, coordinating, and working with DEC for several years now and spending money on the permit renewal process. We've got a great relationship with DEC. It, like many regulatory things, has taken a lot of time to, mostly on their end, to navigate the procedures. So DEC has been actually collaborating with EPA on our particular permit, and I'm hoping to see some action in the next couple months or maybe a little bit longer, and see some progress there.
Going back to 25 for just a second, the one there, no, excuse me, 26, manhole repairs on K Beach. Would DOT the cause of some of these damages, and would they be putting in to help pay those repair costs?
Unfortunately, no. The damage is more degradation on these manholes, and they're actually, unlike most right-of-ways and travel ways, these ones are actually outside of K Beach Road. You'll notice they're in kind of the dirt off to the side near the 4-wheeler trails with some flagging and signs up on it. So I suspect that they were just installed and have experienced just some degradation. So it's not a high priority item, but it's on the list of known infrastructure needs. So unfortunately, we can't finagle money out of DOT on those ones. But we do often get not upgrades, but repairs associated with surface treatments from DOT.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Two questions and a comment. The comment first. I'm not going to question the projects that are in here, and if we need to switch years, you guys are the experts, and you know when we need to be making the replacements or the upgrades to our water and sewer facilities. So we rely on you for that. First question is, I see in 29, we have South Fireweed construction, and we want to put in utilities there. And in the general CIP, we have an FY27 Homestead Lane. Are we going to put Homestead, are we going to have utilities in Homestead Lane? And then my second question would probably be more of a Melanie question.
To your first one, thank you for the confidence in us sequencing projects that are needed in the utility department. To your second question, yes, good observation. South Firewood Street has a companion project in the utility fund and general fund, much like Marydale, and Homestead should also have a utility companion project. So
Okay.
we'll make sure we have that in there.
And then for Melanie, is there kind of like a percentage of funds, because we do end up having things happen like we had over at Lover's Lane this year, where we have projects that are unexpected, so we want to keep a certain fund balance in the utility fund in case of unexpected emergencies?
We don't currently have a fund balance policy for the utility fund. We have one for the general fund, but not for the utility fund. We do budget a small amount of contingency each year in the operating budget for things like Lover's Lane that comes up. I believe it's $30,000. So as things occur, we would just be coming back to the council with, a supplemental appropriation. But as far as what's in fund balance for those, we don't have a fund balance policy. Not sure if that answered your question or not.
More just making sure if we have $2 million in the utility fund, that for a fiscal year, we're only looking at appropriating $1 million for capital projects so that we have $1 million in reserves, basically.
Right. Yeah, we don't really have a policy. We just kind of look at it on a case by case basis.
As we continue to grow and we see more activity, it might be something that at some point you guys have the discussion about within the administration.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. It's that's along the lines that Councilmember Chilson noted, which is our utility fund forecast, where we to the best of our ability forecast expenditures and revenues across the fund to include obviously capital expenditures. And that's the document we referenced. So we may not have a council adopted fund balance policy, but we use, our best judgment and Melanie's financial acumen to make sure that we have adequate fund balance to take care of those emergency issues that may come up. And they're speculation, but
I have just one more thing to add. It's also something that we've taken into account when we do our utility rate study about every 5 or 6 years. We look at the capital projects that we know are coming up, and he factors in those capital projects when he determines our rates. And he also lets us know, which projects would probably qualify for a loan and which ones we should look at, using loan funds for. So it's something we take into account at that time too.
Yep. And then the loan repayments and bond debt, things like that propagate throughout our utility fund forecast so that we can adequately plan for it.
Anything else? Move along.
Okay, I will wrap that up for the utility fund. Unless there's any other questions on those in particular. I do have a couple of good notes here that I will incorporate into this draft. I'll make sure to put together or update that utility expenditure report that Councilmember Chilson spoke of. I can cross-check it right now with this, but I think it'd be best if we just follow up on a spreadsheet.
Go ahead.
Centennial Park Water and Sewer, do you anticipate that will increase the usage of that? Is there room for increased usage? Is also part of the question.
Looking for Parks Director Joel. I think it potentially could. I think that it would be a value added amenity to our most popular and populated park. And it's also a project that we would like to have accomplished before we pave the road. And we would really like to pave the road. That will achieve significant savings on the city, particularly in a rainy year when we have to blade it once a day in the summer. So I would speculate that it would increase some users in the park.
But primarily it's to improve the quality.
Absolutely.
On
Thank you.
these ones that are listed with TBD, you're going to have a number to fill in when we get the,
Not anticipating to.
Okay.
I think that it's okay if we don't identify that. It's cheating a little bit. Those ones are clearly some of the projects that we would like to utilize this document to seek grant funding and loans and say it's a new digester is a priority, and then at that time come up with a better number.
Okay.
So. I know we want to have a little break in between. So I'll jump over to the general fund. Perhaps quite a bit more exciting. Again, back page, that's just last year's council adopted resolution. I made kind of two notes on there. And just to kind of reiterate, you see FY24 up there. We have 4 projects listed in FY24. So last year at this time, council adopted this 5-year CIP. And then we turned right around and brought an ordinance before council appropriating $105,000 in funds to accomplish those 4 projects. And I am happy to report that most, if not all, have been undertaken already. So now we look down at FY25. You can see I've got 3 projects in red. As I noted before, we don't necessarily fund every project in every year. And so each year we take another look at it. Is it still a priority? Have new issues or priorities come up in the last year? Those 3 red projects, we are proposing to keep them in FY25, which is intended to be the capital budget. So we are proposing that we'll fund those 3 projects, albeit with some modifications, as you'll see as we flip over to the proposed work session draft for the general fund 5-year CIP. And there are those 3 projects that last year we had planned on undertaking in FY25. The Streets Preventative Maintenance Project at a reduced amount of $400,000. That's a scalable project. The Police Building Exterior Maintenance at an increased cost based on more recent cost estimates and expectations. Soldotna Creek Park Stage Improvements at a slightly less cost than planned last year because some parts were able to be accomplished with operating funds last year. And then a new project, the Memorial Park Improvements Phase 1 that has work done in the later phase. Again, I think I just called it an appropriately modest capital budget of $575,000 is what we're proposing for FY25. I just was flipping through my sheets and somehow left it on my messy desk, but we do have a list of our capital and mid-appropriation capital expenditures and supplemental appropriations in each fiscal year. For many years, we were appropriating and dedicating 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million towards the capital budget. It ratcheted down about the time state capital budgets largely ceased to exist when municipalities no longer received the essentially cash grants from the state. There was a year where we did no capital budget, and that was the COVID year when we received in excess of $1 million for us to solicit and spend ourselves, and then administered a significant amount of money that we got out into the community in the various programs that we're all very proud of. And then last year, our capital budget was $105,000, really running on fumes. And that was for a number of reasons. But a big one was the field house and the projected cost of the field house, both the capital costs of building the facility, but also the ongoing operating costs. The construction cost was unknown. If you recall some of the funding strategies for that, one of which was to have a reduced capital budget over the next several years, which would allow us to focus our funding on that high priority project. Lucky for us, we got favorable bids. We're moving through that process, and we've got an expected construction cost final. Of course, that's going to change as the project goes on. But so we've increased. Last year was $105,000, that capital budget. This year's $575,000 as proposed currently. It's conservative in the approach, in the fact that the city is much more nimble than other agencies in obtaining capital financing and funding. So we can always bring priorities and projects and needs before the council in the form of an ordinance and appropriate what we call mid-year appropriations for any capital need. And a good example would be so the library improvements that you see in FY '26, we have been strongly considering including some minor library improvements in this year's capital budget, and we're working through a programming phase and identifying our needs and fixes associated with that, but it's not refined and not established enough to where we can definitively say we need this particular amount of money to deliver this particular project. And so we have chosen not to include that in this year's capital budget, but it's very likely when we do conclude that process and we know what it takes to deliver what we need, we'll bring a mid-year appropriation to council and say, for your consideration, we would like, maybe it's not 300,000, maybe it's 178,000 for the following purposes, and ask for council to proceed to authorize proceeding on that project. So my point is, I think that it's prudent to have some projects that we know we can accomplish, and then add some projects mid-year as the needs arise. So I'll just jump into details real quick. Streets Preventative Maintenance Project. This is an existing project. I reduced the cost a little bit. Like I said, it's a scalable project. The intent here, and you'll see this FY '25 is heavy towards deferred maintenance and maintenance. It's something that we haven't put a lot of focused capital in lately. We've kind of focused on other amenities and sectors in the city, but that doesn't mean that we can not pay attention to the less fun projects like crack sealing and seal coating. The streets preventative maintenance would update our streets plan, and we do a study, a PACER rating on all of our streets, identify the rehabilitation, reconstruction, the alligator cracking, transverse cracking, treatment types, and then pick off the highest priority projects. So this project would fund the reanalysis of our existing street and pavements, and then fund the seal coating and crack sealing, partial depth repair, things of that nature. And then similarly, the police building exterior maintenance, also not a fun and exciting project, but if you are near the police building, put a critical eye on it, and you'll notice that the stucco type exterior is in pretty rough shape and needs some attention. So that's 500,000 of the 575, and then we've got two kind of park quality of life type projects proposed, some minor improvements to the stage, specifically at Slotna Creek Park, to enhance the usability of that. We haven't really done much to the stage since we built Slotna Creek Park. We've obviously invested a lot in that park elsewhere, but not the stage in particular. And then Memorial Park improvements phase 1, focusing on kiosks, maps, wayfinding signs, public navigation, clerk blankenship, and not a user group, but an advisory group convened and identified about 5 components and needs at the Memorial Park, some of which are, a bigger endeavor than others, such as paving of the road, which we all agree would be a huge benefit to it, but a pretty big cost adder. But the signage is something that we can accomplish with, pretty quickly and easily through the use of a consultant. So we've phased that project slightly. I'm trying to stay on task, but I'll pause there if there's any questions.
Thank you. So I see in FY '28 and FY '29, we have the maintenance warm storage facility and the mechanic shop, both at our facility on Arbor Avenue. Can you explain the difference between those two projects?
I can. And these are kind of perennial projects, and there was a time when other agencies were receiving funding for this type of project, and we thought maybe we'd perhaps get in on it, and they remained, and they are a need, and we have put in for them. One is the maintenance warm storage facility. When we built the facility at Arbor Street brand new, it's plumbed and prepared for an adjacent warm storage facility. That would allow for equipment that currently lives outside, even in the winter, to have the warm storage longer useful life of the equipment. The crew don't have to go start it and have it run for 45 minutes to an hour in the winter at -20 or whatever. Simply a worm storage facility planned next to the existing facility. The mechanic shop would allow us to consolidate our maintenance activities at Arbor Street and would be a mechanic shop, not just a worm storage facility. So currently, all of our heavy equipment, nearly all of our mechanic work is done at the old shop down Funny River Road, separate from our administration offices and the worm storage. So we would consolidate that activity in town in one central location. So that's the difference between the two.
So if we're successful in getting that capital grant from the state for the Funny River shop roof repair, that could potentially change some of the stuff in 28 and 29?
It could, yes, it certainly could. It could change both the location of some of the services we provide. It could also change the use of those facilities. If you recall, we were fortunate to get a FAA grant to build a snow removal equipment and sand storage building through the FAA for airport obligated equipment, and that gave us the ability to move airport equipment that had to be housed inside a facility into that building and freeing up some space out there. So it would give us the opportunity to reevaluate and be more efficient with our maintenance activities.
And a couple of years ago, and maybe you mentioned a little bit about paving. You mentioned about getting all gravel roads within the city paved, and there was 7 to 9 miles of unpaved roads in the city. Is this Centennial Campground Road paving part of that target?
It certainly would be. Yep, we would include both Centennial and Swiftwater in a Gravel to Black program when we programmed different priorities within the city for pavement.
Thank you.
In talking on that Centennial Campground Road paving, would that include relocating the driveway from where it's at right now to a more safe location?
That project as envisioned and cost estimated does not incorporate a relocation of the approach in its horrendous location near the intersection of Key Beach and Sterling Highway. However, the master plan in FY 2027 Centennial Key Beach Property Master Plan, that definitely would address that issue along with the city properties and the different uses now, in the past, now, and in the future of that whole sports complex area. That's what the Centennial Key Beach Property Master Plan envisions, is to look at that approach. We have considered relocating a frontage road near the ball fields to bring it over to Arena Avenue. As you are aware, we've submitted raised grants and grants for signalization studies for $900,000 just for the study to signalize Arena Avenue. So it's certainly an issue we're aware of and are seeking solutions to. So that master plan would address that, but not the paving project. Yep. Good time for me to note that in the run-up of the capital project or the 5-year CIP, we reach out to all of the department heads who note any changes, modifications, new projects to be proposed. Boards and commissions have an opportunity to review last year's and make comments. The Planning and Zoning Commission, one of their comments was indeed to continue to pursue the Key Beach Centennial Property Master Plan, recognizing the prolific use of the Little League fields, the rodeo. We've got 4-H that came before you guys and have expressed an interest in having a presence there and have changed their venues. And so we recognize that that is a popular area, and adequate proper planning. Don't tell my engineering friend that I said this, but pre-planning will be an enormous help. Jumping into FY 26, many of these are kind of a regurgitation, revisitation, and kind of have moved down. I'll touch on like the Funny River Road shop roof repair that Councilmember or Vice Mayor Parker mentioned. That's something that we're going to aggressively pursue in the next year to find grant and other type funding for it. It's something that we have struggled with. It's certainly a high priority need. Their building contents are not being damaged right now. It's more of an energy and, a few drips here and there and things of that nature. So that roof is beyond its useful life, needs to be addressed. We were not prepared to encumber $900,000 or $1 million for it right now because we feel like we haven't exhausted our opportunities in finding grant funding. And some of the areas we think might be fruitful or, there's current and pending energy related grant opportunities that might be conducive for that project and several others, AHFC and federal. So that's just a reason why we have that in the FY26. But again, the ability for us to be nimble and bring a project before council for your consideration, if we're successful in a grant in, say, August, and we can appropriate those funds, it'll be before the council if we think it's prudent to move forward with it.
Has there ever been any consideration in the long term consolidating public works all in one location?
You mean I get to get out of City Hall?
Hmm?
I've contemplated it. If you go to the sand storage building at the airport, there's an office there for the airport manager.
No, you stay here.
I think loosely, yeah. I think it's within the realm of possibility and long range planning type stuff. Not in the near term. Not in the near term. And public works can be different in different communities. And certain aspects aren't utilities and wastewater treatment, streets. So we're still 7.4 square miles, so we're not terribly inefficient in having disparate locations, but it would be.
If that was to ever happen, where would it be? Where do you think it could be?
I think the Arbor Street location is one area that we've noted would benefit from consolidation in certain aspects, not all. There's no getting away from having, 4 or 5 operators at the sewer treatment plant at most times. We also have resources at different areas of the city. So there's a gravel pit near the airport that we use, and there's snow removal and truck time, things like that can make a big difference over the course of a year. So I guess to answer your question is Arbor Street for most activities, but I don't think we'll ever get full consolidation in one specific area. So real quick, a couple of I noted that there's a few grant opportunities out there in the state capital budget. We were fortunate to have a couple projects included in it. Of course, the governor has not signed the budget and still has the opportunity for the line item veto. So we don't know whether or not those projects will stay in the capital budget or not, but that is the design of the conference room expansion to the tune of $690,000. And then also the sand storage, outdoor sand storage facility of $300,000. The conference room expansion design is just that. That's something that's been before council and would be the design phase for expanding the conference room. We have some conceptual drawings that kind of show the size and shape and a cost per square foot estimate. The sand storage cover is simply, you've seen these clear span fabric covered structures, industrial of nature or agricultural. It would be put over our giant sand pile, which is out Funny River Road, and keep the snow and ice and rain off of it in the winter. And we would potentially have to have less additives to that sand pile, which would be a good thing citywide. And we wouldn't have to struggle with breaking it up and usability.
If Go ahead, Mr. Jolson.
Just a question about the SRSC conference room expansion design work. Should the governor not veto that in the budget this year, what are the limitations on how long we can sit on that funding from the state before we have to execute on that? Is that going to be is that going to be an issue having that scheduled for FY27 if we're awarded it this year in the state budget?
Great question. Answer your first question. It's been a while since we've received a state grant and typically administered through DCCED. In the past, they've been 5 years, but not statutorily required. So they've been able to be extended beyond the 5 years. But in the past, the grant agreements have listed 5 years for. And then to answer your second question, I think we would, if we were successful with that, we would revisit and reintegrate, knowing that we're going to have these fundings and perhaps a deadline. We would revisit and reintegrate that in what's most advantageous for the city.
Perfect. Because last thing I want to see us is us sit on that for a couple of years and then go to execute. And as you mentioned, inflation costs now
Agreed.
Exceeded. Okay,
Agreed.
thank you.
New project in FY26, Soldotna Police Building Generator, and I'm trying to hit on some of these newer projects, but feel free to ask about any projects at all. Soldotna Police Building Generator, we've got this one on the list because the city currently is plumbed electrically to the CS Fire Station 1. So when there's a power outage in that neck of the woods and our police building does not have power, we rely on the CES Fire Station 1 generator to kick on. We all know that the fire station is slated for relocation to their new building that bids, I think on the 26th-ish, something like that. And so we know that that's going to take a while to construct and before they relocate and remove, but sometime in the near future, the city and the borough will need to discuss that generator and probably that building in general. But we want to make sure that we plan for that project. In 27 Memorial Park projects, I touched on this briefly. This one is new to the 5-year CIP. However, it was incorporated into the council adopted legislative priorities that was done last fall. And again, that was based on a working group that convened and identified the needs at the Memorial Park that continues to be successful. Call it, okay? Okay. That really concludes the new projects that we've integrated into this. I'll touch on a couple of things that some boards and commissions talked about. And I think John's here, he can elaborate even more. But like planning and zoning, you know, they advocated for advancing the trail and pedestrian movements, improvements, advocated for various components to be incorporated into capital projects such as cultural type components to wayfinding and signage. They supported the construction of fireweed and upgrades of a couple roads that we would certainly look at under the streets project. One comment from P&Z that's not new is consideration of utility expansion into unserved areas. It's something that I know that Jeanette is actually tasked department heads with addressing, which is opportunities for expansion into unserved areas, whether that's through new policies and procedures and programs that have cost sharing, things of that nature. And then the P&Z supported quite a few of the projects already identified in the plan. The police department, the SPD generator we talked about. There was some comments about their repainting of their bay floor and some street sign installations. So, you know, when we start talking about capital projects and delivery, a lot of times we determine whether or not a project is you know, a long-term fixed asset and belongs in the 5-year CIP and capital budget, or if that's something that is small enough to be included in an annual operating budget under a contracted services line item. So something like repainting the garage bay floors is something we'd look at the next fiscal year to potentially incorporate into the police operating budget, or the buildings line item under the maintenance budget, perhaps not the police operating budget, probably go under the buildings. The clerk's office talked about the Memorial Park improvements. We've kind of already gone over that. The library, as I noted, for about a decade now, I've kind of held the library at bay due to their $7 million investment. But that was 10 years ago now. And they have grown in their programming, they've grown in their staffing, and there's some specific needs. One of the big ones is just places for their employees where they can be efficient at their work and not be disrupted by the public and inquiries from the public. And so some office or workspace. And so we are using the donation that we were fortunate to receive to work with design professionals to program and identify our specific needs, and then how do we make changes to our facility that make sense to meet those needs. And when we have those deliverables and come to a decision on what's an appropriate modification, then we can do some cost estimating and then think about implementation. So that's something that may come before the council, you know, as a mid-year appropriation once we better define the scope, schedule, and budget. Those are, I'm happy to talk about any particular project. I'm happy to go through every single one. I know that typically you guys like a small break, but you want me to hit on a few more projects, Mayor? Or
No,
just
sir.
entertain questions?
Go ahead, Vice Mayor Parker.
Instead of talking about these projects, can you give us a 2-minute update on the field house and how things are going there?
Absolutely. Things are going very well at the field house. Foundation form work is happening today. I want to say 60 tons of steel reinforcement is being delivered tomorrow. I think 60 loads of building steel, pre-engineered metal building, are slated to be shipped to us, not for a little while. So things are going really well. A lot of site work has been occurring out there. I encourage anybody who wants, obviously the SRSC is still in operation, so folks can go there and you can kind of, you know, peek around and see what's going on. If anyone would like to grab a hard hat and get down in the nitty-gritty for a tour, just get a hold of me and we'll get out there. We've worked on both parking lots. The footers have been dug. All the utility work has been, water and sewer utility work has been accomplished. Before you tonight, there is a resolution that, and I'll get into it tonight, so I probably won't give you the admin report right now, but a utility easement for HEA to run their power to the building. So things are going really well. Good relationship with the contractor, working through, you know, the various and assorted tasks associated with delivering a big, you know, expensive project. So we are still on target for building erection in about July. And then we'll get the panels and roof on. We plan to get it tried in so that they can continue to work throughout the winter. They will currently our completion date is a moving target with various and sort of change orders and you know, minor additions and deletions to the scope, but it's going to be early summer when we reach final completion. Some aspects will need to be targeted for good weather. There's a lot of landscaping and topsoil and seeding. And then the city still has a significant amount of fixtures, furnishings, and equipment that we are owner providing, owner installing. So, you know, a significant dollar amount in flooring, sport court flooring and turf flooring, and then the amenities, because we do want to make sure that the facility is ready for full community use right from the get-go. So Joel and CO have been working diligently on that aspect of the, interior and the equipment. Jeanette and Melanie have, and I and others have been talking about the funding mechanisms and the bond and loan opportunities. So it's going really well. I'm very pleased with the progress so far and no hiccups, expecting a successful on-time, on-budget completion.
Anything else from the council? Questions or comments? If not, then we'll go ahead and conclude